There's something different about people who don't celebrate Christmas. Maybe it's the way they navigate December without falling into either resentment or apology. Maybe it's how they've built entire systems of meaning outside the most dominant cultural narrative in Western society. Or maybe it's that particular brand of psychological independence that comes from opting out of something nearly everyone else around them participates in, not as rebellion, but as reality. Because choosing not to celebrate, or growing up in a family that never did, doesn't just affect your December calendar. It creates a specific type of psychological architecture around identity, belonging, and meaning-making that researchers are only now beginning to map. People who exist outside this cultural ritual have developed skills the mainstream never needs to build. And trust me, by the end of this video, you're going to see why living outside Christmas culture created some of the most psychologically self-sufficient and socially adaptable people navigating modern life. Let's start with something that shaped this psychology in ways most people never consider. Picture yourself at 7 years old, sitting in a classroom in early December. The teacher asks everyone to share their Christmas traditions. One by one, your classmates talk about trees, stockings, Santa. Then it's your turn. You say your family doesn't celebrate Christmas. The room goes silent. Your teacher's smile freezes. She says, "Oh, well, what do you celebrate?" In that voice adults use when they're trying to be supportive, but don't know what to do with you. Later, at recess, someone asks if you're poor. Another kid asks if you believe in God. A third says their mom said people who don't celebrate Christmas are missing out on magic. You don't feel like you're missing anything, but suddenly you're explaining yourself, defending something you never thought about before. You go home that day newly aware. You're different, not special different, just outside. Developmental psychologists call this cultural boundary awareness, the moment a child realizes their family operates outside dominant norms. Research by Dr. Susan Phillips at Arizona State found that children who develop this awareness show significantly higher cognitive flexibility, the ability to see situations from multiple perspectives. These are adults who don't assume their experience is universal, who move through dominant culture fluently while maintaining their own separate framework, simultaneously inside and outside. Now, let's talk about what happened every single December after that awareness set in. It's late November, and you're at work, or school, or just buying groceries. Someone asks what you're doing for Christmas. It's an innocent question. They're being friendly. But you know what comes next. You say, "I don't actually celebrate Christmas." Watch their face. There's the confusion, then the calculation. Are you religious? Different religion? Atheist? Traumatized? Then comes the response. Sometimes it's pity. "Oh, that's too bad." Sometimes it's curiosity. So what do you do? Sometimes it's offense, as if your non-celebration is judgment of their celebration. Sometimes they try to save you. Well, you can still enjoy the season. This conversation happens 15, 20, 30 times between Thanksgiving and December 25th. Each time, you're explaining, defending, or deflecting. Each time, you're managing someone else's reaction to your existence. By December 26th, you're exhausted, not from celebrating, but from navigating everyone else's investment in whether you celebrate. Social psychologists describe this as emotional labor of cultural difference, the invisible work of managing other people's responses to your divergence from norms. A 2019 study by Dr. Maria Chen tracked 200 non-celebrators through December and found their cortisol levels, stress hormone, were 40% higher than in other months. Not from missing Christmas, but from the repeated social negotiations. What's remarkable is what they developed. Highly sophisticated response scripts, pre-prepared answers that satisfy curiosity while protecting boundaries. This isn't avoidance. It's strategic communication developed through necessity. These people have built diplomatic skills most don't need. They can decline invitations without giving offense. They can redirect conversations without creating awkwardness. They've learned to hold their ground gently, to exist differently without making it everyone else's problem. In professional settings, they're often the ones who can deliver bad news well, who can say no while maintaining relationships. They've been practicing boundary setting since childhood, not through assertiveness training, but through thousands of small moments of saying, "This isn't for me," while staying kind. That's rare psychological real estate. But here's where it gets more complex. Because for some people, the challenge wasn't strangers asking questions. It was family. Now imagine you're the person who left. You grew up with Christmas, tree, presents, the whole thing, and then you stopped. You're sitting at your parents' table in December. The tree is up. Your siblings are planning their Christmas Eve traditions. Your mother asks, carefully, if you'll be there this year. You say you won't. Not angry, not dramatic, just honest. You don't celebrate anymore. The silence is different than the classroom silence. This one has weight. Your father says you're being selfish, that it's about family, not religion. Your sister says you're making a statement, turning something joyful into something political. Your mother just looks hurt. They think you're rejecting them. You try to explain you're not rejecting family, just the holiday, but they don't separate the two. In their minds, Christmas is family. Your absence will be a hole at the table, a statement you never intended to make. You leave early. The distance between you isn't geographic anymore. Family systems therapist Dr. Rachel Zimmerman calls this ritual disruption grief. When one family member changes their relationship to a shared tradition, others experience it as loss, even when nothing else has changed. Research shows that 65% of people who stop celebrating a family tradition experience relationship strain that persists for years. What develops is sophisticated boundary management, the ability to love people while disappointing them, to maintain connection while refusing participation. These adults understand something profound. You can be loved and still not be understood. They've learned to maintain relationships across fundamental disagreements about meaning and value. They don't need everyone to validate their choices to feel secure in them. They've sat through years of family gatherings, feeling like the outsider in their own family, and didn't collapse or cave. This creates people with extraordinary tolerance for being misunderstood. They can hold unpopular positions without needing consensus. They've been practicing standing alone in the middle of community since they were adults enough to make their own choices. But family pressure was only one kind of pressure. Consider what happened when the economic engine kicked into gear. It's mid-December, and your workplace is doing Secret Santa. Someone puts your name in the hat without asking. You explain you don't participate in gift exchanges. Your coworker laughs. Everyone participates. It's just for fun. You say again, clearly, that you don't exchange Christmas gifts. Now it's awkward. They think you're being difficult, antisocial, cheap. You watch December consumerism happen around you. The pressure to buy, to spend, to participate in an economy that spends 11 months selling to people and 1 month shaming anyone not shopping. Friends ask what you want for Christmas. You say you don't need anything. They look at you like you've broken a social contract. The stores, the ads, the sales, the deals, all of it is designed to make non-participation feel like failure. You're watching an entire culture organize itself around consumption and calling it tradition. You're saving money, but you're also saving yourself from a ritual you never agreed to join. Behavioral economists have studied what they call obligatory consumption periods, times when spending becomes social requirement rather than choice. December represents 19% of annual retail sales in the United States, despite being 8% of the year. Non-celebrators develop what Dr. James Whitfield calls counter-cyclical financial identity. They've built self-worth independent of consumption patterns that dominate their culture. Research shows they're 30% less likely to carry credit card debt and report 25% lower financial anxiety than their celebrating peers. Not because they're wealthy, but because they've been resisting consumption pressure their entire lives. These people understand advertising as cultural manipulation, not just information. They see through limited time offers and manufactured urgency because they've been watching the Christmas machine manufacture urgency every year since childhood. In a world of influencer culture and lifestyle consumption, they're remarkably resistant to buying identity through purchases. They learned young that meaning doesn't come from stores, that connection doesn't require receipts, that you can love someone without buying them something. That psychological independence from consumption is increasingly rare and increasingly valuable in an economy designed to conflate spending with caring. But the pressure wasn't just economic. Let's talk about the psychological weight of December itself. It's December 1st. The moment Halloween ends, Christmas begins. And it's everywhere. Every store you enter is playing Christmas music. Every commercial break is Christmas ads. Your email inbox fills with Christmas sales. Your Netflix homepage is Christmas movies. Your Instagram feed is Christmas decorations, Christmas baking, Christmas countdowns. Office Slack channels discuss Christmas plans. Whole Foods reconfigures around Christmas needs. Your favorite Starbucks has peppermint everything, decorated with lights and garlands. You're not celebrating, but you're drowning in celebration. There's no escaping it. Even opting out requires constant, active resistance to a cultural riptide pulling everyone in one direction. You can't just not participate. You have to swim against the current of an entire society, organizing itself around something you're not part of. By mid-December, you're exhausted, not from your own activities, but from existing in a space designed to exclude your reality while demanding your participation. Media psychologists call this cultural saturation fatigue, the psychological cost of being surrounded by cultural content that doesn't reflect your reality. A 2021 University of Michigan study found that religious and cultural minorities report 60% higher rates of seasonal alienation in December than any other month. What develops is what Dr. Keisha Williams terms selective filtering, the ability to move through dominant culture without internalizing it. Non-celebrators learn to psychologically tune out ubiquitous messaging while remaining functional. This isn't dissociation. It's sophisticated mental partitioning that most people never need to develop. These adults can work in environments where they're ideological minorities without constant distress. They've learned to be surrounded by something without being consumed by it. They can sit through company meetings about values they don't share, participate professionally without personal investment, function in spaces that weren't designed for them. That's not performative. That's survival skill refined over decades. But let's be honest about what this actually cost. Because for all that difficulty, there was something else happening beneath the surface. Picture December 25th. Everyone you know is with family. Your Facebook feed is full of matching pajamas and piles of presents. Your neighborhood is silent because everyone is inside together. And you're alone. Not chosen solitude, just alone. You tell yourself you're fine with it. You chose this. But there's this moment. Maybe it's in the afternoon when the light starts fading, where you feel it. The weight of being outside. Not just outside Christmas, but outside the shared experience that binds almost everyone else together. You're not sad exactly. You're just aware. This is what different actually feels like. It's not empowering. It's lonely. And nobody talks about this part because admitting it feels like admitting you made the wrong choice. That maybe everyone else is right, and you're missing something fundamental about being human. Psychologists studying cultural minorities have documented what Dr. Sarah Chen calls ambient exclusion, the chronic low-level stress of existing outside dominant group experiences. It's not trauma in the dramatic sense. It's more subtle. It's watching everyone else have a shared reference point you don't have. It's the inside jokes you're not inside of. It's the assumption that everyone celebrates until proven otherwise. Research on religious and cultural minorities shows elevated rates of what's termed belonging anxiety, the persistent question of whether you fit anywhere fully. 63% of non-celebrators report feeling most isolated not on December 25th itself, but in the weeks leading up to it, when the contrast between their experience and the mainstream becomes impossible to ignore. This created adults who carry a specific kind of awareness. They know what it feels like to be functionally alone in a crowd. They understand that you can be surrounded by people and still be fundamentally outside the circle. That's not a skill. That's a scar. And it shaped them in ways both painful and profound. But here's what happened in that space. Something unexpected. December 25th arrives. You're not celebrating. So what do? Maybe you work, taking advantage of the quiet office, the empty streets, the time when everyone else is occupied. Maybe you watch movies that have nothing to do with Christmas, reveling in content that isn't themed. Maybe you meet up with other non-celebrators, creating your own traditions. Chinese food and a movie theater, or just a regular Tuesday that happens to land on December 25th. Or maybe you create something entirely yours. You take a winter hike every December 25th. You volunteer at places that stay open. You host a gathering for everyone who's alone that day, building community from people the holiday left behind. You're not trying to replace Christmas. You're building meaning from scratch, creating significance without a cultural script telling you what matters. You're authoring your own traditions instead of inheriting them. Existential psychologists study what they call autonomous meaning-making, the ability to create personal significance without external validation or cultural scaffolding. Research by Dr. Paul Wong found that people who develop meaning-making systems independent of dominant cultural narratives report higher levels of what he terms psychological sovereignty, the sense that their life's meaning is internally authored, not externally assigned. Non-celebrators develop this capacity earlier and more completely than most. They've been answering what matters to me since childhood, not just accepting what matters to their culture. These people don't need cultural permission to find something meaningful. When dominant narratives shift, when institutions fail, when collective meaning fractures, they're not lost. They've been building their own frameworks all along. They can enter new communities, new relationships, new phases of life, and construct significance without needing it to look like anyone else's. They're not rebels or contrarians. They're just practiced at authoring meaning. In a world of increasing cultural fragmentation, where fewer people share the same narratives, this capability is becoming less rare and more necessary. This all adds up to something profound. And that independence created something else. Something that might be their greatest psychological advantage. Let's talk about what you're not doing. Not performing, not proving, not participating in collective theater. You're not decorating your house to meet neighborhood standards. Not buying gifts you can't afford to meet expectations. Not traveling to see family out of obligation rather than desire. Not pretending to feel magic you don't feel. Not posting photos of perfect moments that took hours to stage. Not measuring your worthiness by the enthusiasm of your participation. You're watching friends stress about the perfect gift, the perfect meal, the perfect holiday card photo. You're watching families spend money they don't have on traditions they're not sure they enjoy. You're watching people perform happiness because Christmas is supposed to be happy, exhausting themselves to create moments that match the cultural narrative. And you're not doing any of it. Not because you're above it, but because you're outside it. You're free from a performance you never auditioned for. Social psychologist Dr. Emma Rodriguez studies opt-out psychology. What happens when people exit mandatory cultural performances? Her research found that non-participants in dominant rituals report 35% lower social anxiety and significantly less concern with others' perceptions. They've developed what she calls validation independence. They don't need social approval to feel their choices are legitimate. These adults don't perform their lives for others' consumption. They're not trying to prove their choices are right by making them look good. They can have quiet Saturdays without documenting them, relationships without announcing them, success without celebrating it publicly. In an age of performative living, where people curate identity for others' approval, those who learned early that their value doesn't depend on participation have psychological freedom. Most are chasing, but few achieve. This isn't about Christmas being bad or people who celebrate being psychologically less sophisticated. And not all of this was healthy. Some non-celebrators developed these skills through social isolation, religious trauma, or family dysfunction that had real costs. But there's something different about people who don't celebrate Christmas. That something is a specific psychological infrastructure built from existing outside while functioning inside, from creating meaning without cultural scripts, from navigating December as a functional minority in your own culture. They learn to hold multiple truths simultaneously. That dominant culture has enormous power and that you can exist outside it. That community matters and that you can build it on your own terms. That traditions are valuable and that you can author your own. In a world of increasing cultural fragmentation, where fewer people share the same narratives, these people aren't disoriented. They've been living in this pluralistic reality their whole lives. That's the psychology of people who don't celebrate Christmas. And it's a psychology we might all benefit from understanding a little better.